All right, so now we're going to talk about blockchain, basically the thing that allows cryptocurrencies to function long term and keep track of all the transactions. So blockchain is basically a ledger of all transactions that have occurred. So you have to know the history of all the coins all the time, so that way you can't double spend a coin twice. So you can say, hey, I'm sending it to Alice, but I'm going to send the same coin to Bob, and if they don't know that I sent it to both of them, they both think they have a valid coin, but they both can't have the same amount of money because that wouldn't work. So
That's what blockchain ultimately solves, is that double spend problem. That it makes sure that everyone agrees on the state that what happened when. And you can still try and do these double spend attacks, but they'll always at least go to one person. And right now, the way it's set up, it's pretty tough to pull that off successfully and repeatably.
So blockchain consists of blocks which are filled with transactions, and the transactions consist of to and from addresses along with cryptographic signatures that allow you to move it, basically.
Yeah,
So,
and essentially what's happening when a block is generated, they're just gathering up all the transactions through a stretch of time, and then when a miner solves it, all they're doing is essentially playing this lottery math problem where it's no matter how many times you try it, it has equally likely outcome of getting the answer that you want. And the thing is, very easy for everyone else on the network to verify that you got this answer, and that's the way they essentially be able to. Whoever gets the right answer that everyone knows has the right answer, they are chosen the leader, essentially. And whatever they say the block is, that's the order things
that's
happen.
the valid block.
Yeah, as long as they're not trying to do anything that isn't valid by the protocol. So it has to be valid, and it has to also have that right answer on there. But having it where anyone can try this problem, and it doesn't matter how much mining hash power you have or how little you have, you still have the same likelihood of doing it. It guarantees censorship resistance because no one can know who the leader is going to be, and so you can know that they can't censor a transaction reliably because ultimately there's not going to be one person that's going to find this answer all the time because there's too many different players mining all at the same time. And so it's kind of this random leader election that chooses what's valid and what's not.
I mean, we can say, this is kind of getting into the other uses of blockchain as well. There's a lot of people looking at trying to basically keep track of, parcels of land or provenance of goods and just follow it to make sure it's basically verified history, more or less.
Yeah, and that's the other property of the blockchain is that once it's included in the blockchain, nothing can rewrite that. And that's part of that math problem. Finding that right answer, well, that right answer is based off of the previous block. And so all the energy expended to find those right answers, well, the blockchain that's considered valid is the longest chain with all the right answers on it. And so, well, if someone got the right answer on here, but they were pointing back to a block that wasn't the one before it or didn't have the other right answer, then everyone would say, no, that's not a valid block, even though they had the right answer. So there's a way to make sure that once, pretty much after 6 blocks, which is 60 minutes about, it takes so much amount of energy to be able to rewrite that history that you can be pretty much guaranteed, till the heat death of the universe, that there's no way they could have changed the information that's already in the blockchain. And that's the key thing. And I guess the other key thing to make it work is that it's an open, publicly available ledger that everyone can see, that you can't censor somebody or lie to them about the origin of that blockchain.
So basically, in summary, blockchains are basically a set of historical events that everyone agrees on and is what they're going to call truth. So this is, it's a mechanism to say, this has happened, and here's the order, here's the transactions that have happened that we all agree on. And you can look back at the history then and know with certainty that is valid for everyone on the network. So this is another slide about mining, about actually doing the block verification. Like you alluded to before, it's basically guessing. The way the computation is done is just basically trying to guess the right answer to this cryptographic puzzle. And the winner of that, if they have a correct, valid block and they get the right answer, and people can verify that first, that is put on as the next new block in the blockchain. So they basically, at this point with Bitcoin, they've taken this cryptographic puzzle and they've gotten it so efficient now that instead of just using it like on a CPU on your computer or
and writing it in software, they actually wrote it in logic gates. So it's in silicon at the highest levels of technology that your regular CPUs are. That they're the, you know, what is it, 12 nanometers or something, which is
12, 14.
which is pretty much what your CPU, like Intel and all these other major companies, they're at the same level or better technology than all these large companies. But all that chip does is this math problem.
Yeah, so like this chip, you can't like send it anything but the Bitcoin mining math problem. So if that were to change, all of this hardware on all of these places is completely just not worth anything.
And I think right now it's about 400 megawatts globally to run the Bitcoin blockchain, which is like a couple small countries. But I still think it's a lot more efficient than, like, if you look at Goldman Sachs or any other major bank. It's like, well, these people are the existing financial system. That, well, what was the cost to run a giant office building and then, you know, pay all these executives way too much money to fly around helicopters? You know, like, it doesn't take long to get, you know, 400 megawatts pretty quickly. So people say, oh, it's such an environmental waste. I think it's still much better than the alternatives. Not to mention all the waste that comes because of ill investment by financial firms. But it's about Bitcoin, not about the problems of our
So just kind of more about how can we trust the system. So can you know that these systems are, you know, how can you trust what the miners verify as valid? So basically you're getting to, there's types of ways to prove it out. You have proof of work, you have proof of stake, or a hybrid of the two. So the basic idea is that you have all this investment to do these transactions, which most of them are incentivized right now by they get the transaction fee. And for Bitcoin, there's a block reward that's built into the protocol that slowly ramps down over time. Basically, inflation.
It halves every 4 years until like 2041, 2140. 2140 or something like that. And the thing is, everyone can calculate that out and say, hey, look, it's going to add up to 21 million coins. And, you know, that's where that verifiability comes in.
So Bitcoin is a pure proof of work model. So like you was alluding to earlier, all those miners that have to run these guesses to verify this, they all take, you know, a lot of electricity, and obviously there's a hardware investment as well. So, you know, basically the only way, you know,
you can't lie about that information, because the only way to generate that is through expending energy, and that's really what you're trying to get at, is making sure that they're spending the energy and they have some skin in the game. So that way their incentive is to do what's in their best interest. And the protocol is structured in such a way that, you know, everyone's best interest, even if you want, you know, if you're trying to be selfish in any way, the most selfish thing you can do is make sure the system perpetuates itself.
Because at some point, to overdo it all, like this means that most of the entities need to spend more than the entire rest of the network combined to basically put fraudulent transactions on the blockchain or manipulate in a way that would be advantageous for them. However, if they can do that, no one's going to trust that blockchain anymore also, which means that whatever the tokens or you know, Bitcoin itself, the cryptographic currency, is not going to be worth very much after they do that. And all the investment of, like, literally at this point, it'd be hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment would also be worth absolutely nothing because you destroy all of it. So, I mean, you'd have to have...
Because the value of the system is securing transactions, and if you invalidate that value proposition, then you just destroyed the whole currency. And not to mention...
entire investment to try to kill it.
Even if people didn't run away from that like crazy, because, like, hey, these guys are screwing around with the blockchain, it's also very obvious to, you know, it doesn't take much forensic work to figure out who did that. And once you find out who did that, then you can take measures where, well, okay, they invalidated, you know, they did some fraudulent transactions. But, okay, maybe the rest of the network's going to say, well, we know who did it.
We know where it happened.
Let's just back up the blockchain and say, let's, you know, fork it and go a different direction and change it so that way these bad miners don't get to continue to be part of it, which would probably be a proof of work change. And, you know, it'd be very disruptive.
Invalidate everyone's mining equipment, but at the same time, you would maintain the funds would stay with the individuals before the attack happened. Basically.
Yeah, so there are recovery things, and this already happened in Ethereum, which is it's kind of like Bitcoin, but actually a Turing complete language. It's essentially a giant virtual machine. So it runs any computer code you put on it. It's just very expensive to run it, but you can guarantee that it executes in the way it's programmed. Well, a year or two ago, there's a big hack. Well, it wasn't really a hack. There was this smart contract named the DAO, which is like the Distributed Autonomous Organization, and it raised like 150 million,
Somewhere
or
around there.
a lot of millions. And there was a bug in the code. It executed Ethereum never screwed up. It executed the code perfectly. Problem is the code was written poorly, and someone siphoned off like 60 or 70 million dollars. And at the time, Ethereum, its total market cap wasn't more than a few $100 million. So pretty much everyone agreed and said, okay, this really hurts Ethereum because, well, everyone that's invested in it lost a lot of money. So we're going to back this thing up. And so it actually forked. So now there's Ethereum Classic and Ethereum. Ethereum Classic kept the hack in there.
So someone still holds that, at the time, 60 or 70 million
Now it's probably worth
of
like,
Ethereum tokens,
probably $1 billion or something like that now.
because it went back up.
Yeah. So like there's some people that aren't even aware of that history, which is kind of,
Which I think is why it's probably valued so highly at this point.
yeah. And so there are ways, players in the space, that you're pretty much guaranteed, as an individual, the system's never going to do anything to hurt you because most other people using the system are individuals.